Fucking hell, this is mental.
Don't look on the screen, just move your camera in relation to it. It'll be easier. Like watch the quad and move your hands. Give the battery a rest.
So this is the GepRC ZX5 5 for 5 inch. It's actually a 190mm frame X-frame kit, true X-frame. I mean, I've been wanting one of these X-frames for a while, and the guys at Banggood sponsored a build for this. Very kind of them to send that over to me. Some of the things that are included, you have a pretty respectable PDB there, 1 to 4S PDB with a 12 and a 5V regulator on it. You also get one of these XT60 Plus pigtails, which has the kind of the grip on it. These are pretty nice. And the usual kind of accessories you'd expect. You get rip ties. You actually get the standoffs in the kit, the plastic standoff kit, which is a nice touch. Not all frames come with that kind of stuff. A few extra spares, nuts and bolts. This camera plate here, which is a nice touch. I chose not to use this as there was a couple of different mounting options which we'll go through, but for the price of the kit, it's pretty comprehensive. In terms of the actual quality of the carbon itself and the cut, I've got to say I've been pretty impressed, again considering the price of the kit. The actual carbon weaves pretty tight. Normally with these cheaper carbon frames you tend to find that the weave is quite far apart and it's not particularly good carbon, not well put together. And the other telltale sign of cheaply manufactured carbon parts are around the edges. You tend to find lots of kind of pits and marks where they haven't been machined very well. That wasn't the case at all with this. It was very nice. The edges weren't sharp. I mean, I do this with all of my frames anyway, just especially where wires are going to be running around and near frame edges, is just to get yourself a micro file and just to with a bit of water just go around the frame edges. There's a couple of reasons for this. One, as I said, is to make sure that no wires would accidentally rub on the edge of a sharp carbon corner. But the other one is just to make sure that you don't, I mean, as these things crash, and they will crash if you're flying nice and hard as you should be, these edges can start to delaminate and fray, and that goes for any carbon frame. So rounding these edges off will help reduce that effect. So it's well worth doing. So yeah, the quality of the carbon I'm actually pretty impressed with. This has a 4mm 4mm arms on them, and they're all separate. If I spin this over, you can see these 4 arms go in, and they join in the middle. They all lined up really nice and neat. I was again very impressed with the machining and the fit of everything. And then you see that also supplied with this is this nice kind of grippy rubber sticky back pad that you put on the bottom, which the battery will sit up against and grip to nicely. Again, I've seen X-frames far more expensive than this come without this kind of accessory, and then you end up having the battery sitting on the bottom against the screws, which is obviously no good at all. So the actual attention to detail with this quad, with this kit, has been really, I've been quite surprised, again just because it's a cheap kit. Roughly working out to about £38 delivered, I believe, from Banggood. The way that this stacks up, again, there's lots of different ways to do this kind of pod design, but this one in particular, you can see there are 4 small standoffs. Now, I will say this is one tight build. This is not a beginner's build at all. I would even say this is kind of, even the intermediate builder might find this a real challenge. You can see there's the flight controller on top, which is my SPF 3. There is absolutely no room for pins, obviously. You've got the PDB on the bottom, flight controller on top, and if I angle that right, you can see there is really, I can just about get my spudger here in on the top. So there is really very little room to get all this in. I think this might suit better something like the Singularity board, where you have the flight controller and the PDB in one. I haven't tested out one of those yet. It'll be interesting to see how they work out, but it does, you know, this will work, but I'm just saying this is an incredibly tight build, and I'm going to put some pictures after this, some nice close-up pictures. I did take pictures along the way as I built this, so you can see what I had to do to get this all to work. And for the sake of continuity, I'm going to show you those pictures right now. So you can see here the PDB, and although I showed you the one included in the kit, I actually decided to go with this instead, which is a Maytech PDB with a direct side mount XT60. There's a couple of reasons I went for this PDB. One of the main reasons is the distance between the PDB and the flight controller, the actual gap between those is very, very shallow, so there isn't a lot of room to stuff wires under there. One of the nice things about this one is that it has the plus and minus in each corner, which meant that I didn't have to run any wires across to positive and minus rails like on the PDB that came with it. And it also means by using a direct XT60 that I didn't need to use a long pigtail and have extra wire flapping around. There was also this little platform here on top of the XT60 where I could mount the radial capacitor, something I like to include on all of my builds. Moving on to the flight controller, you can see here I've just flipped it upside down to make it easy to work on. I've had to remove the pins and directly solder the signal and ground wires for each ESC directly to those through holes. Now, although I was quite happy with this because it kept it nice and low profile, those solder joints, although I was happy with how they turned out, are still fairly fragile with those servo wires being so thin. And just for my own peace of mind, what I decided to do was then run a couple of streaks of hot glue across there, which will help keep them in place and take care of any vibration that might cause those joints to become brittle. I have actually managed inside of this top pod to get you can see the VTX there, just on the top of this base pod plate, an LC filter on top of that. I've got the XSR, FR Sky XSR, you can just about see up against the underside of the top plate. And then I've got the HS1177 in here. Now, I did show you this camera plate, which you can see here. So if you wanted to mount more of a board style camera, although it's not the full size board size camera because it won't fit in there, but a small board size camera, you can do that. And you can see here this would mount in this top hole here, and then you have notches where you can adjust the swing angle of the camera to whatever you desire. It also has the direct 3-hole mounts here. I'll just angle that right, you can see you've got 3-hole mounts here for the 1177. So I prefer, obviously it's a little bit of a weight saving not having that there, so I preferred to do that, and that's what I did. Although the only thing that was a bit of a pig was the fact that the HS was actually, if I put it this way, you can see it's not wide enough to actually meet the edges of the brace. So really they need to include some kind of spacer washers there. And what I ended up doing was going and I got these from Maplin here in the UK, but these are silicone, soft silicone O-rings, washers rather, and this is off of a PC fan, so to quieten down PC fans, so you can get a whole bunch of those, and I put one of those either side of the camera, and that with the screws in the side then meant that we have a nice fit, and it's still nice and adjustable for angle, but it holds absolutely fine, no problem at all, so that worked. Another nice inclusion in the kit was a rubber O-ring on the side here to mount the SMA. Now I will say that if you think you're going to get an SMA to fit with a standard VTX like this sideways, you're going to be out of luck, because by the time that's behind the plate, there's just no room for it to fit in sideways. So you could use a right angle connector back there and perhaps mount this way or the reverse way, but yeah, it's not really going to work. Really, your better option, which is what I went for, was to use a VTX, something like the Unify Pro or something where you have a pigtail option, and I have a right angle pigtail SMA in there. You can just see the pigtail itself on the underside. and that works fine, and there's a little bit of dampening there from that rubber grommet. I've had more than a few crashes and it's been absolutely fine, and something like this TBS Triumph with a nice thick stiff wire has held this up and out the way of the props. The only modification I had to make was the battery straps here. While the battery strap cutout was fine this side, on the other side it did get in the way of where that XT60 was going to come down off the PDB. So that meant that I had to actually just file away, which has made no odds to the structural strength of anything. It's just meant that the strap's going to come out a little closer to the body, which is absolutely fine, as you can see. And it also meant the XT60 is right there. So with the battery on now, it's battery straight to that. There's no extra wires or you know, weight or things flapping around that could get into the props in the way. I also, as you can see, just found some room here to mount the buzzer. There's lots of extra holes and bits here to pass rip ties through, to clamp down things like that. So yeah, that's all been pretty good. I also managed to just about squeeze on an LED board and rip tie those, an adjustable LED board, which is then connected off to the flight controller. One of the nice things with this frame as well, if you fancy doing something a little different, is the two standoff hole patterns here. They actually have the same hole pattern on the side of one of these arms, and on the opposite side, so you can actually take this pod and rotate it round so that it's in I think it's called a T configuration, but basically turns it into a plus with the camera facing this way. I've not experimented with that. For me, I prefer the X because it's just the traditional thing and I like the way it looks. But if you wanted to try out the T configuration with the camera facing and the pod facing this way, you could also do that. So yeah, there's a lot of options really. There are also these two little ears here which are mounted off of this cross standoff here. I'm not entirely sure what they are meant for, whether they were meant to be used as something to mount aerials off of. For me, they've actually been perfect little kind of braces. Let me show you. You notice the strap on the top here. This whole space at the top, I've added some silicone pad at the top there, is a perfect space for the GoPro session. And with that, I just kind of loosely put that on. You can see that squares up beautifully, and those two pads just kind of act as stoppers for that. But I found that to be a really solid mount, and works really well. And you know how small the GoPro session is, so it gives you a real idea of just how kind of dinky this frame is. But that said, being that small, it has also come in lighter, and I will put in the description the actual weight, as I don't have my scales right here, but the whole thing is definitely coming in at a very light weight. So on 4S, as I've geared this to be, this will absolutely move like stink. And from my test flights, and I'll put some footage in there for you to have a look at, I've got some flight footage and some external flight footage, so you can really appreciate how fast this thing goes. It really shifts. I've loaded this with the DYS XS30As. Both the 30As and the 20As I'm finding to be excellent. Both BL Heli S and working great. And I've decided in this case, these are actually, I would say 190mm frame, you'd think this is really designed for 4-inch props. But this runs absolutely fine on 5-inch props because of this small pod. And if I just pop one of those off, I can show you that the clearance is you know, it is tight, but it's, you know, it's what you expect there. But yeah, you can run 5-inch blades on this, no problem. So I've decided to put on a set of these ZMX V3 2206 2600 kV motors. I'll be doing a separate review on these motors, but they're great. Like I said, I'll talk more about these at a later date, but they're really efficient. Don't draw nearly as much amps as similar motors, which makes them perfect if you're going to be running props like this, where you're dealing with bullnose 5-inch props on a little craft like this, that works out great. I would even say potentially this could be an interesting 5S setup. I may even make this the jump to 5S just for the giggles and see what that's actually like. Another thing of note now, I'll just show, I'll insert some pictures here so you can see. The first time I flew this, it was a bit of a jittery mess. And it's really a subject of harmonic resonance. Every frame is going to be ever so slightly different, and even if you've got new motors, new props, new everything, you could still find that a certain harmonic resonance exists that will be a pig to your flight controller and cause it to have all kinds of vibration. Of course, the nice thing with things like Betaflight 3 is that you can, or any of the Betaflights come to that, but especially with the latest Betaflight and the Betaflight black box viewer, you can have a look at the gyro traces and see whether there is a nasty amount of mechanical noise getting through to the gyros, and it just so happened that there was, and this was very unhappy. So you can see I've gone to a bit more, some greater lengths to put in some silicone dampening either side of this flight controller, and even some down just below the PDB, just to really try and dampen this down. And you'll see the before and after screenshots, which I'll put in, of the gyro traces. But you'll see just how noisy they were before, despite everything running smoothly, and then just how smooth they were once I did this. So, you know, sometimes you can obviously look at software to cure a certain amount of things when it comes to vibration, certainly with low pass filtering, and that's all well and good, but it's always good to take a few steps back and try and mechanically tune things before, because that will make for being able to tune higher PIDs and a better flying craft if you can get this to be mechanically nice and vibration free as far as what's getting through to the flight controller before you start messing around with low pass filters. So yeah, big difference once I added some soft dampening for that flight controller. As I said, I could buy exactly the same frame, or 10 frames, and each of them will have a different harmonic resonance point. It can be, just it just is what it is. But that is one of the beauties of having Betaflight. At least you can go in there and have a look at the gyro traces and see how much mechanical noise is getting through, and do your best to mechanically sort that out before turning to filtering. So all in all, I'm really very impressed with the quality of this kit. For the price, the amount of stuff you get with it, and at this price, if I did break an arm, I'd probably just, rather than try and hunt down a separate arm, I'd probably buy the whole kit again and have a whole load of spares, because it's it's so cheap. And yeah, in terms of flight performance, I've been very, very impressed. One quick note before we finish with the close-up, it does come with this nice exploded diagram. And this has been, I really like exploded diagrams. This is old school. I love this kind of thing if you're going to put something together. Nothing wrong with this at all. This diagram is easy to follow, nice clear instructions. There was one tiny mistake I spotted, which is down here there are one set of M3 bolts, which are actually a set of 4 that are longer than the rest of them, and those 4 are the ones that go through the X frame. The X brace rather, the aluminium or aluminum for my friends over the pond, through that brace and up and protrude that just so that the 4 plastic standoffs can bolt straight down on top. So I think those are off. I haven't actually been able to check yet, but I think they're M3 by 15. So this instruction here seems to say that they're all M3 by 10 underneath. They're not, and you'll see the 4 screws in the kit that are longer. They're the ones that go through to the flight controller standoffs. Other than that, excellent. That's really all you need to put it together. There's no rocket science involved in putting this thing together. But yeah, all in all, it gets a thumbs up from me. Very impressed with it. Nice, easy kit to put together, to build into. As I said, it's an advanced one. So if you want a challenge or a slow burner, something to really take your time over, this is where I would put this. If you're just starting out, you can see. I mean, this is super tight. I would suggest maybe looking at something where the pod is is bigger and there's more room to work inside. The payoffs for this obviously are generally this is a little more lower profile than some other models I've seen on the market, which is a good thing, especially if you're then going to be mounting a session camera or something on top. You want just to bring this down a little bit closer to the centre of gravity, and also being tighter and smaller, things just tend to be a little bit lighter. So yeah, all in all, thumbs up. Let's get on to the close-ups and the flight footage.